Wow. Okay, we're good to go.
You're not there, you're just gonna be really. You're right.
So I construction going to, oh no, I Wednesday.
Good evening, it is February 20th, 2025 at 7:01 PM. And this is the town of Wellington, Connecticut, for the finance meeting. And we're following the budget meeting agenda. Meeting's called to order and we will start with seating of the alternates. Yep, Christina, so we have a motion for Brett for Christina.
I believe she's. Are you sure she's upcoming?
Well, we could seat her now, a sub now,
Okay.
when she comes in.
Okay, I move that we seat Brett Rosshauser for Christina Malhouse.
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. That's the only one we. All right, so we'll move on now to the approval of the minutes. We'll start with the minutes from January 16th, 2025.
Well, that goes back up.
Anybody can let us know if there's any edits that need to be made, and if not, then we will approve them.
Move to approve the minutes of January 16th, 2025.
Second that. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any abstentions? Any nays? Okay. So.
Oh, should we say for the recording? Stephanie Summers moved and who seconded?
I did. Okay, well,
Gonna be
first I'll
all-
second it. It was unanimous.
Thanks.
So next we'll move on to the minutes from February 6th,
Here's
2025.
They're on the back of.
Yeah.
So if you go to page
Page
4
5, yeah.
and then flip it over, they are the head of the page. The only thing I saw on those was there was a comma, but that's not worth thinking about, so.
Okay.
I don't know, you've seen those t-shirts where Tom is missing. Can make all the difference.
Oh, yeah, I'm a big fan of the Oxford gum.
Anybody have any edits they'd like to make? If not, could we have a motion to accept the,
Move to receive minutes of February 6th, 2025.
okay, got a second?
I wasn't here.
I wasn't here either.
I'll second it.
Go Joe.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Extensions.
I'll abstain.
And so Walter abstains, Stephanie abstained, and Jason.
And I'll say aye. It's Christina.
All right, thanks, Christine.
I'm on my way, by the way. I'll be there in a few minutes.
Okay, thank you. All right, does anybody see the minutes in here from?
Yeah.
February 30th? They're back, they're in the middle of the two.
Yeah.
So they're on the back of the last page of,
Probably.
Yeah, there it is, right there.
Bruce, I made a mistake. I was at the 6th, not the 13th. So, we've already taken the vote, that's all right,
Okay,
but, I'll have to abstain twice, I guess.
okay.
Move to accept the minutes from February 13th, 2025.
We have a second.
I'll second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any abstentions? Any nays?
I'll abstain.
Okay,
I believe Christina's going to stay on that meeting. She will be there.
I'll also abstain.
There you go.
so.
You were at 7:30.
Okay, she's there. All right, so Christine abstained and Steph abstained. All right. Next, we'll move on to present to speak. Public participation is desired and encouraged. Speakers will be limited to time and appropriateness of comments to maintain progress, stay on topic, and maintain decorum. We have anybody here for present to speak? No, then we will move on to new business. And item 1 is the presentation of the 2023 to 2024 audit report by Mike Vandeventer of Mahoney Sable.
Very good.
Good evening, Mike.
Good evening. All right, my name is Mike Van Eventer. I'm a partner at Mahoney Sable, ultimately responsible for overseeing the audit and issuing the reports on behalf of the firm. Joining me is Carolina Swall. She's a manager at the firm, really responsible for the day-to-day execution of our audit procedures. So happy to be here to communicate the accounts fiscal year 2024 audit. Hopefully you've received electronic copies of all the reports that were issued in connection with the audit. There's a lot of information in those reports. I'm going to go over the presentation, cover the scope of work, the results of the audit, provide some overall financial highlights. I'll make our required communications and certainly will be happy to answer any questions that any of the board members may have. So if we can turn to slide 2 of the presentation, in terms of the scope of work, no changes from what's been performed in prior years. We did do an audit of the town's financial statements in accordance with both the auditing standards issued by the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants, as well as the government auditing standards issued by the Government Accountability Office. In addition, based on the level of federal and state funding that was received and expended by the town, we did also perform both federal and state sync audits. We also perform a agreed upon procedures engagement on the end of school year reports that are filed by the school district with the state of Connecticut Department of Education. In addition to those attest services, we do perform some non-audit services for the town. So we do assist in the preparation of the financial statements, the schedule of federal awards, and state financial assistance, as well as the related notes. We also assist in converting the town's governmental fund financial statements to the government-wide financial statements. In order for us to perform those services and remain independent of the town, management is required to oversee those services and ultimately accept responsibility for them. Again, Donna, as the business manager, has accepted responsibility for those services, and therefore we do remain independent of the town. Again, we do issue a number of reports in connection with our work. In terms of the report on the financial statements, we did issue unmodified clean opinions on your financial statements. Again, we issue an unmodified opinion when we've concluded that the financial statements are fairly presented in all material respects in accordance with accounting principles generally accepted in the United States of America, and that is as established by the Governmental Accounting Standards Board. I do like to point out, if you read our opinion, we do provide reasonable assurance that the financial statements are free from a material misstatement, whether due to fraud or error. Again, we do not provide absolute assurance. We are not testing every transaction. We do utilize sampling in our audit methodology. The financial statements do include estimates, and therefore we cannot provide absolute assurance. But again, reasonable assurance is still a very high level of assurance. In addition to the report on the financial statements, we do issue a report on compliance and on internal control over financial reporting. If you read this report, we do not actually express an opinion on the town's compliance with laws and regulations or on the effectiveness of the town's internal controls. Essentially, during the course of performing our financial statement audit, if we identified or became aware of a material non-compliance with laws and regulations or a significant deficiency or material weakness in your internal controls, we're required to include it in this report. Again, we're not reporting any such matters. In connection with the federal single audit, we issue a report on compliance at the federal award level. So in this report, we do actually express an opinion on the town's compliance with your major federal programs. For fiscal year 2024, the total federal awards that were expended were approximately 1.1 million. And the coronavirus state and local fiscal recovery funds was the major program. Again, we did issue unmodified opinions on compliance over that program, and we did not report any deficiencies over grant compliance. We issue a similar report in connection with the state single audit. For fiscal year 2024, the total state financial assistance that was expended was approximately 4.5 million. The majority of that is your education cost sharing funds, which are not subject to the compliance audit. The portion that was not exempt was about 598,000. The major programs were the Town Aid Road Grant and the Local Capital Improvement Program. Again, issued unmodified clean opinions on compliance over those programs, and we did not report any deficiencies over grant compliance. And again, the main compliance requirement that we do test is allowability to make sure that you're charging allowable costs of those grants. Next section goes over your financial highlights. Again, there's a lot of financial information that's included in the financial statements. Certainly encourage you to go through those statements and understand them, ask questions of management. Certainly, if there were any concerns from a financial perspective, I would include it in these overall highlights. The first slide talks about your general fund budgetary highlights. Again, your original budget did plan for the use of fund balance in the amount of $1 million to balance your revenues and expenditures. Your final budget did include additional appropriation of just over 20,000. So that resulted in an overall planned use of fund balance in the amount of $1,020,822. Your actual budgetary results was a decrease of about 120,000. So that resulted in an overall favorable budgetary variance of about 899,000. That favorable variance was really driven by revenues exceeding your budgetary estimates by about 763,000. You reported favorable collections on property taxes, conveyance taxes, building permits, and interest earned on short-term investments. Then overall expenditures were approximately 137 less than budgeted. Again, no budgetary instances of non-compliance were identified as a result of that. Next slide goes over your governmental fund financial highlights. So again, this includes your general fund on a GAAP basis, as well as all of your special revenue and capital project funds. There are detailed statements for each of your funds in the financial statements. As of year end, the total combined ending fund balances was approximately 8.8 million. That was an increase of about 1.2 million from the prior year. Of the 8.8 million, 4.5 million was in your general fund, which was a decrease of about 165,000 from the prior year. Of that, approximately 2.5 million was considered unassigned, and that represented about 11.8% or about 1.4 months of the fiscal year 2025 budgetary expenditure appropriations. And again, a 900,000 was reported as being assigned for use in your fiscal year 2025 budget. Your overall capital project fund had an ending fund balance of about 350,000. That was a decrease of about 18,000 from the prior year. The American Rescue Plan Fund had an ending fund balance of about 9,000, which was an increase of about 7,000 from the prior year. Again, you did recognize about 150,000 in grant revenues. And as of year end, you had approximately 515,000 in ARPA funds that were reported as unearned revenues. Again, those needed to be obligated by December 31st, 2022. All of your other funds had an ending fund balance of about 3.9 million, which was an increase of about 1.4 million from the prior year. The majority of that is in your reserve for capital non-recurring funds. You also have about 796,000 that's restricted as part of your Small Cities Grant Housing Fund. Those are primarily in the form of loans. You had about 821,000 committed for your fire and ambulance fund, and then about 622,000 restricted or committed for other programs and purposes. Again, no fund deficits were identified. The next slide goes over your government-wide financial highlights. So this consists of your governmental fund financial statements converted to a full accrual basis of accounting. It includes all of your capital assets, your infrastructure, as well as your long-term liabilities. The town was reporting a positive unrestricted net position of approximately 6.6 million as of year end. That's really attributed to your low levels of long-term bonded debt in the status of your pension and OPEB liabilities. As far as your net pension liability, You actually had a net pension asset as of year end. That was really driven by favorable gains on your plan assets. So again, that plan was fully funded as of year end. That will fluctuate depending on the market. And then you do report another post-employment benefit liability that reflects retiree healthcare benefits for eligible employees of the school district. That's funded on a pay-as-you-go basis. The actuarial determined liability for those benefits total approximately $1 million. And again, that's utilizing a discount rate of about 3.9%. Last section goes over our required communications. Again, these communications are really geared towards when the auditor runs into issues during the course of the audit. We have certain requirements to communicate those issues to those charts to the board. The first item here talks about our responsibility under the auditing standards. Although we do assist in the preparation of the financial statements, again, they are the responsibility of the town. It's our responsibility to perform our procedures and express our opinions on that information. In terms of the plan scope and timing of the audit, again, there were no changes in the overall scope of work. There was a 1-month extension that was requested and approved by the Office of Policy and Management, and that was really to allow for sufficient time to review and approve all the reports. In terms of significant audit findings, we'll typically communicate any new accounting standards that may have a significant impact on the financial statements. Again, there were no new accounting standards that were implemented for fiscal year 2024. The financial statements do include some significant estimates and judgments. Those consist of estimated useful lives that are assigned to your capital assets, as well as discount rates that are utilized to determine your net pension and OPEB liability. We did review those estimates. We did deem them to be reasonable and consistent with what other municipalities do. I'm happy to report that there were no significant difficulties encountered in performing the audit. Again, we were provided with everything that we had requested in a timely manner. We had no uncorrected misstatements, so any audit adjustments that may have been identified were proposed and were reflected in the financial statements. We had no disagreements with management. We did obtain a management representation letter. There were no unusual representations that were requested by us. I just give the board an example. If we're doing the audit and we were unable to substantiate a transaction and we were relying on the representations from management, we would communicate that to you. And we're not aware of any consultations by management with any other independent accountants. Again, if management consulted with another accounting firm, we would have to understand why, and we would have to have that communication with the board. And again, we're not aware of any such matters. So with that really covers the overall results of the audit. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Mike, how long have you been doing this for us?
I've been on the audit for several years.
Enough, right? Well, I was just wondering if you could spotlight any, year over year trending differences. I mean, we did do that sort of savings account move with money for education capital expense that we know one way or the other is going to happen and that we want to address. Anything you saw or anything maybe over a 5-year span you see that is either a positive trend in the way we're operating as you perceive in the audit?
So that is a very good question. One that I probably can't answer kind of right off the top of my head. Again, didn't see anything, from a concern perspective. But I'd be happy to take a look at that information and give you probably a much better answer than just kind of trying to think off the top of my head.
I'm speaking partially because we have a lot of large issues that, that are going to take any capital expense in our future. And we're always grappling with how to address those and the smart way to do it and what we can do in the it's not early days, but in preparation. So yeah, I would.
Yeah, as I mentioned, I think
to
from a town perspective, you don't have significant pension and other post-employment benefit liabilities. Right. In general, you've had low levels of bonded debt. So again, just understanding those projects and the impact that they would have on the mill rate, on the budget, that's something that, depending on the projects, we could discuss. But in general, I think the town's been very stable from a financial perspective.
I know you're more of a check and the checks and balances process, but if you had any sort of advisory scope for us, without any, legal, undertaking there, we would value your opinion since you've been a financial advisor for a good long period of time. You and your team.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's a good question, but again, just off the top of my head, I'd have to kind of look at the financial information.
Any other questions?
Set it straightforward.
Everybody ready to move on?
Donna, did you have anything to add on this?
Oh, no.
You wouldn't think of it? Okay,
All right,
just wanted to ask since you're kind of a big player in this.
And again, there's a lot of work that's done. There's a lot of hours that we spend doing the audit. If you do have questions, feel free to, filter through Donna. I'd be happy to answer them throughout the year at any point in time.
Thank you. It's very helpful this evening. Next, we'll move on to item 2, which is 0126, register of voters, do they have Chapman and Kristen's access?
Hello,
Hello.
nice to see you all again in person this year. Christine's joining us on Zoom,
She's up there.
and Shapita and Kathy, as everybody's are here as well. You have the information with the cover letter that we sent you. We're happy to address any questions or concerns you may have about what we presented. We had a new and different year with the onset of early voting. And we successfully survived it. We always have, we always have new things coming up. That we are expecting to receive new tabulators in the next couple of months. The town has signed the lease agreement for said tabulators. And it has been returned to the Secretary of the State. And we're just waiting to see exactly how they would like us to remit the payment for that lease, which is $1. I believe the lease agreement is 25 years. We'll be getting 6 tabulators and their related equipment. We're also anticipating a new centralized voter registration system from the state, which is in the works, and we'll be doing some training for that in May. And it's expected to roll out in June. So those are kind of our big up and coming things.
That's the software, did you say?
The new software is called Total Vote.
Can I just say that when we presented to the board last year, we mentioned that there were going to be legislative changes coming up, though we didn't know what they were going to be. Well, we found out it was early voting, and we got hit pretty hard. I think that we probably safe to say that there could be legislative changes coming up again. We're hoping this time that those changes concerning early voting will be a benefit to our office and to the town. However, the legislative session is not going to end until June 4th.
Anybody have any question?
You have any early line on what the discussion is on that?
I'm sorry, Steph?
Do you have any early line on what the discussion is on that? Is it relief for smaller towns that have a lot of extra expensive staff for small numbers of voters?
Suzanne, I don't think that we really have any idea. I mean, registrars and the Secretary of State have chimed in, filled out many surveys, given our opinions about what happened and what we would like to see changes coming up. One of them I think the change would be to reduce the number of hours and perhaps the number of days of early voting. Again, who
Yeah,
who knows what the legislators will decide?
Across the board in the surveys that were done by our professional organization, as well as the Connecticut Conference of Municipalities and the Secretary of the State's office, it seemed like an overwhelming response from registrars and election administrators was that it was too many days. So we're hopeful, and that seems to be an opinion shared by the Secretary of the State's office. So we're hopeful that perhaps that's one of the changes that will be made.
Shared by the executive officer and CTF as well, that there was, because one of the primaries, we were at $938 per vote or something like that. The return on investment doesn't seem to be there.
Shocking.
I just want to thank the registrar and assistant registrars for doing an outstanding job under difficult circumstances, given the number of law changes and number of days that they had to work. And
it's a
the
fast
training they have to
shuffle.
go through.
The other thing that's new this year is a constitutional amendment passed to change, to allow the legislature to formulate a law for no fault absentee balloting. And that law has not yet been made. We do not know how that will affect early voting. I believe that because the town clerk's office handles all of the absentee balloting, it will have more of an effect on the town clerk's office for the absentee balloting part, and perhaps a residual effect on our office because of the impact it might have on turnout for early voting. But again, we don't know. I feel like every year for the last number of years, we've come to you and said, we don't know.
No, but that insight is great, and I thank you for that. And Pete,
Any other questions? Fill out the old machines. They were highly effective, so. All right, we're gonna move on. So we're moving on to item number 30132, the treasurer, Doug Roberts.
Hi, good evening. Based on not having to make any of those requisitions from last year, my first year as treasurer, I just removed them with this year's budget. So let me know if there's any questions, concerns.
this is the bank's fees, you said, did you reinstate those?
The bank fees were requested last year
Right,
and they were
I remember.
rejected. So I did not put them this year. We renegotiated terms with the bank as far as avoiding those fees. We got an adjustment in what they call the earnings credit ratio. So as long as we maintain a certain balance, the fees we can counter those fees and services that we can take advantage of. So.
And we're at that now.
Yep.
Thanks.
Yep.
Any other questions? Right, next item.
Okay.
Item number 40161, Conservation Committee, Carol Jordan and Kathy Demers.
Hi, good evening. I'm Kathy Demers. I'm the chairperson of the commission, and unfortunately Carol Jordan, our treasurer, was not able to join us tonight. We submitted our budget request similar to last year. Of the $1,500 that we're requesting, the items include funds for membership and conferences, programs and outreach. We often work with the library to put on educational programs related to conservation and environmental education. We also use the funds to help with managing the parks at Ruby Park, as well as the trails off of Mason Road. We use the funds to buy materials and use volunteer power to replace boardwalks and bridges and keep the kiosks in good shape. And also at times we use some of the funding for open space monitoring to make sure the boundaries aren't being encroached on and be sure that we have boundary markers that are still in place. Be happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Any questions for Kathy? No. All right, Kathy, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for your support.
Next, item number 5, 0171, 0172, 0176, planning and zoning, ZBA and IW, Mike Piamato. Am I?
Hi, everyone. So I think you have, I put together a memo, similar to what you've seen before that just kind of outlines the budget. It is, essentially the same as what was submitted last year. There are increases which are largely related to salary lines that, are separate from what we submit, which are in line with the union contracts. And then, really the only, increase, which was the same increase that was requested last year, sort of ahead of schedule for an expense that hit and will now be part of this fiscal year, is referenced sort of in the second paragraph of planning and zoning. It's an increase to the system that we use to host and manage all of our documents. And so the server that used to sit in this corner crashed a couple of years ago. It was determined by IT that it was cheaper to do a cloud-based system than to purchase and maintain a system on premises, which is why we went to the cloud-based version. Other than that, everything is flat. I guess the only other thing I will mention is, not sure if it was this cycle or last, but the line item that is used to pay the cost for the permitting software that everybody uses was moved from building to land use. So there's no change in that. It's just that we oversee and manage the actual contract and implementation of the program, and worked with them to get a reduced rate on the contract that we're under now. So it just was easier to have it there since it comes out of our office, but it's not an increase. And I'm happy to answer any questions you have for those three, or I can go into the ABC budget, which is next.
I'll just ask you about the cloud option, versus, does that, I know that, that's like what everybody does and everything else, but with the way information is frail in terms of its security, I'm just wondering, for a 300-year-old town almost, is there any loss, and are we keeping the historic records, land records sort of intact as much as possible unless they were moldy and infirm and we had to let them go altogether? I mean, could you just sort of give us a top of mind review of that?
So when we had that server failure and there were issues, which some of it predates me, there was a loss in some of the data. There was an issue that happened with the server and whatever was going on, and so certain documents were lost. That was why we pushed to scan the paper files that we had because they were continuing to degrade. So we have a cloud-based system that we use. There is a redundancy as part of that contract that they're required to provide. But we also have two separate backups that we maintain locally, one of which we have here, one of which is on a password protected hard drive that we keep in the town clerk's vault. So even if the cloud-based system goes laserfish, ceases to exist, and all of our town systems fail, we still have a completely disconnected external drive. And then through the scanning process, all of the documents that we do have that we were able to save are indexed. So if there's a digital file that exists, we can tell you what box it's in. We can go to that box, we can pull that file. It's all indexed now.
I also believe that the town clerk has gotten a grant to do some printing of books on the acid-free paper for all those records. for the vault as well. She's gotten some money for that preservation and documentation.
Okay, is that for fiscal year 25, 26 or
I,
24?
she just signed the thing like 2 weeks ago, so
Okay. Oh, good.
she's working hard on that project.
Any other questions? All right, we'll move on to item 60175, economic development, Mike Yamato.
So, this is a fairly uncomplicated budget because there's one line. And so the EDC had discussed this at their meetings and they determined and voted that they wanted to submit a request for the 23,000, which is what they were at 2 years ago. That $5,000 was cut from their budget last year. And they are requesting it be put back in. It's essentially had funded their sort of town signage. And so they had intended to continue on and do at least 4 of those signs to sort of hit the major gateways. They got 2 of them done with 2 fiscal years ago. So they wanted to submit the request again. There is no other change to that.
The signs are 5,000 for 2.
Correct.
And what is the 18,000 for?
So that is for basically our services to the commission, whatever the economic development support, which has been consistent and flat. There's no increase to that. They do not have a recording secretary. We do the agendas and minutes are part of our support to the commission. So that line was eliminated. We've also foregone, there used to be a separate website that they paid to maintain an email account and all those things, which we no longer have or pay for.
About 6 months, 7,500 of the 18 was spent at the end of December.
Yeah, we have a flat rate contract, so we bill monthly, just like we do the town for the planning and zoning stuff.
Yeah,
So
so at that rate, you're still not gonna hit 18 grand by June. When's the budget?
Yeah.
July, I think it's this, yeah, I think it's 17,000. I can check the number. I don't know based upon billing and payment what it hit, but it'd be the same as the last fiscal year.
Is that a full committee now?
We have 1, 2, 5. Sam Hills, Cheryl Mitchell, Bill Rankin, Matt Clark, and Mike Johansson. So 5, yeah.
And the chair,
Matt begrudgingly continues to chair the meetings, but they sort of operate in unison with everything that they do. They haven't discussed it most recently, but I think he would love for someone else to take over the chair.
Any other question? I mean, granted, I know nobody's here from last year, but that's. We'll, you know, what are we getting out of this? We're always at this, you know, unfriendly planet, unfriendly, but you got a zoning that doesn't really want anything, and then you got the economic, you know, this economic development, thing, oh, it's got some.
Sure. So, I mean, over the last couple of years, I mean, and most recently, they've really tried to take that issue by the horn. They are in the ending stages of developing the townwide or economic development strategic plan, which is something that was funded through ARPA to try to figure out how to pull all of these threads that you're touching on together and develop a way to move forward. So that's been a lot of work on their part in managing the consultant and that plan and public outreach and meetings. We helped them administer the town's grant through with ARPA, so there were small business grants. Several dozen small businesses got grants during COVID to help do things they had to put off or keep people on the payroll. So they've done those things. They have met with other economic development officials in other towns. They've done we did East Windsor, Berlin most recently, to try to figure out if there's anything that's missing. So, you know, they've certainly put in a lot of effort, and different people would have different thoughts about what you are or are not getting out of it. At the end of the day, they can tee everything up, but it's not their job to hit the ball down. And so, you know, that's something that they're working through. But they certainly have put a lot of time into taking ownership of how to move the town forward, what options exist, and being cognizant of the various stakeholder positions and what comes next.
Mike, do you know when we're gonna get the report?
So a draft report was given to the commission right around January. So they've been going through, we've had some special meetings to go through and get their comments and feedback. So there's a meeting coming up where they're gonna meet with the consultant to go through their thoughts and sort of what those revisions might look like. They want to have some targeted sort of discussions, hopefully with groups like Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance, Planning and Zoning. And then there will be a more formal, sort of polished public presentation of the plan. Because if it's not widely adopted and endorsed, then it won't do much. They're just trying to really hone in on how to prioritize what's in the plan so that it's not this, you know, insurmountable task. So they're meeting and going through that. We've sent those comments, but the expectation is to have that wrapped up fairly shortly.
I like the idea to have meetings with other boards and so forth. Because you know what, that way you don't wind up with situations that no one's gonna support after putting a lot of effort into it.
Yeah.
When you mentioned those, did you mention conservation?
I didn't mention conservation just now. I know that they were, I think, I don't want to speak for them, but I think they were talking about the decision-making bodies. So control the budget, you know, obviously control of the town through Board of Selectmen, and then the group that's responsible for development. So I guess unless maybe you meant inland wetlands, because they are decision-making, so it probably is part of that. But the purpose of this plan is different than the P.O.C.D. in that there's really a portion of this really looks at the fiscal outlook of the town. Where are we? And what was the town's budget? What will the town's budget be? What happens if we do nothing, right? Because as to your point, everybody submits requests to you and everybody wants those requests funded. I want my request funded. But if we don't do anything, the only way to do that is to saddle the residential taxpayers with that burden.
Understood.
And so they're trying to figure out, what does that look like? If we pull on this lever, how does it change? If we pull on that lever, how does that look?
Right.
And what part of that vision is most tolerable to the town? The POC doesn't really get into that because P and Z doesn't look at tax base and taxes and those things. That fiscal piece is not really part of that. So I think there will probably be more people included. Those are just the three.
Yeah, I mean, just the reason I'm bringing them up, and I guess I would bring up education too, is for the buy-in process. It's important to have those voices if you're looking for any kind of buy-in townwide, so you know that. There's.
All right, any other questions for Mike? We'll be moving on then to item 70232, emergency services, fire protection, Todd Snyder, chief.
Yeah, I was just informed about an hour ago that we're on the agenda, so I looked at the short list here. Yeah, I looked at the short list here, and I believe Donna had most of the
Yes, I did.
information for you.
Yes, I did. These are not line items. It's just that the dry fire hydrants were in the public works budget. And the public works director didn't have any, it wasn't under the realm of his responsibility. It was under the realm of Stu Cobb, the fire department. So I thought that it would make sense to put the fire hydrants together and the dispatch fees together. Dispatch fees were always in fire protection, and AEDs were in that little group too. So So that's what you're looking at. The first request is for the maintenance of the fire hydrants and the water main on Route 32. There's 5 fire hydrants. And
That's the one we vote against every year, isn't it, Jeff?
yes, Peter is right. That's the one that some people like to vote against. The dry fire hydrants, the request is the same as it's always been for quite a few years, $1,000, just to new parts and things for the dry hydrants. The AED request of $6,000.
That's just the pipe that comes out of a pond. Yeah, and that's all it is, like she's
Yeah.
saying, it's mostly the budget for parts.
Yeah. Okay, the AED request for $6,000. That is to
And some
allow
batteries.
an AED at the fields at Hall School. And then replacement pads and batteries for the devices that we already have. And the dispatch fees are from Tallinn County. And that's for the fire departments, and the piece that is the dispatch fees for the dog fund is charged to the dog fund.
Wait, can you say that part again about the dog?
Yeah.
Yes, so the dispatch fees, the dog, there's like a piece of it for animal control.
Okay,
It's split 3 ways, the dispatching, the 2 departments and the animal control officer.
oh. Okay, is it based on,
Per call.
okay, so if the call is to get a dog, it's counted towards that.
I'm not sure exactly how that's split up. I think that, like you said, it's based per call, so I imagine if there's only a couple calls for the animal control officer, it'd be a smaller portion. The rest would be divided between.
The animal control portion is still relatively large. But I think it's because there's a basic maintenance fee on top of, for those instead, on top of the number of calls. And this was something that got set up about 5 years ago, I believe. When the animal control officer had no contact with TN. And so they've been provided with a phone and a radio so that they can call TN, call True.
Do you know what that piece is? How much that is?
That was presented under the dog fund part, so,
About $3,000.
yeah.
Oh, and before that was added in, was it zip? Or was it?
Like 5 years ago? Yeah, the animal control is out there. Doing what animals, I don't know. That was before my time, but it was decided that because they spend a lot of time on the highways and other busy roadways, that it'd be best if they had some kind of communications.
Here's why I'm asking, because I remember TN doing a, presentation to Board of Finance.
Yep.
About completely redoing their fee structure. Sounded like it was, instead of more about population, it was more about area of a town. And
I think they
I'm
run away from that and they're
using
going to
shorthand,
the per calls now. So it depends
per
on how many
calls
calls
now.
your town has rather than the area of your town.
whether for calls in our town.
Yes,
Okay, so that guides the
that guides.
the cost,
fire
because I
department.
remember it going up at a huge clip. It was something like 25% the first
Well, I
year.
mean, it's up 31% this year.
What dispatch?
Oh, sorry.
No, that's
The
fire
whole- the
protection.
whole thing. Oh, the fire.
Well, that's,
The dispatch fees are only up 3%.
it's 2 things in a different account.
That's what I'm wondering, if it's that moving it over kind of mass the impact of that
And
long-term
I think the reason for
increase
the
in
big
dispatch.
increase in this budget was because the fire hydrants got moved from another budget to
Okay,
this
that-
budget.
So this is not, the overall town budget's not good,
The overall town budget's not gonna go up that much, it's just that
Just that this.
it got moved out of another budget and into this budget.
So we did that with the hydrants, and then we did
And
but on the
fire.
other way with the dispatch fees for the,
Animal control, I think it's
Animal
always
control.
been under animal control.
oh, okay,
Yes, it has.
okay.
Yeah.
All right,
So we're simply looking at the dispatch fees, a $900 difference. The
Yeah,
change,
but it still was, in 2023, it was $20,000.
so what,
Right,
So it's
so
still,
it's still,
like, it's only up 900 this year, but it's up a lot.
This is
We have
one of those
30
fees,
three,
kind of
but-
like probate court where they send you the bill.
Right, But-
I just, I
the list drive?
well, except it grew
would
like
love to
60%.
see some competition in the area.
In a 3-year period, it's up 60%.
Yeah, I tried to
Well,
get them
2-year
to come to
period.
dispatch us, but they wouldn't do it.
There's a new formula.
well, and I guess, like, if there's a call in Union and our ambulance goes there, who pays for that call? Do we
I
pay
don't
for it,
know.
or does Union pay for
Yeah, I can't answer that, I believe.
Mike McCoo has his hand up, should we ask him?
Yeah.
The quiz master.
Good evening, Mike McCoo, Wellington Hill Fire Department. I don't have some of the answers, but what I can say is not only is Wellington represented by having chief members from each department on the in the association that oversees Tallinn Dispatch, Wellington also has a municipal representative, and I don't know how active that person is. I'm not even sure who that person is right now. But that person should be representing Wellington's interest at the county meetings. And that person should be able to report to us or to the Board of Finance more of these answers, I would assume. That is something that was added years ago, a municipal representative.
it?
Who's here? Maybe he knows.
Stu.
What's the question?
Do you know who our municipal representative on Tallinn Dispatch is?
It was I heard Dick Palmer.
Oh,
And when he was fire marshal?
And he's still deputy fire marshal.
Okay,
The idea was to have somebody that was not from either fire department to be literally a municipal rep.
So maybe that's a resource we can leverage in the future, or maybe even that person could be sent an email and asked what information they have to help answer some of these questions. That's what I've got.
Thanks, Mike. I may have other answers if you have other questions.
So my question was, if someone from Union calls for the ambulance, does Union pay for that call, or do we?
Yeah,
pay for that?
it's calls located only within your town. Those are the only ones that on the paper call price structure that they have now. It's only for calls within your town. So if we go to Union or any other town, it doesn't cost us anything.
Okay,
so Union's only part of ambulance coverage for its citizens is the Tallinn Dispatch calls,
All dispatch,
that fee.
right, dispatches. Union and all of Tall County and a few more.
Right. Right, but they don't sustain any other cost with that one.
they
They're
are
fine.
paying us
Yeah. They're fire
a fee now for ambulance service. I believe it's not that much, like $5,000 a year, but they are paying.
Do we know what that is in this budget? Did that come up last week?
Did, we didn't have an answer for you.
Cause it's been
I
costed
don't have
out,
that
you know,
answer, but yeah.
before, so I was just
Yes,
wondering.
and no, back more than a year ago, that fee was zero. And then they came up with $5,000 COVID money, and now I believe that they're continuing at that rate and,
Actually, they came up with 12,000 as a, you know, as a one-time payment out of ARPA money.
yeah, I believe it's
And they-
5,000 a year now, but I'm not, I.
Right, but when we sort of cost it out at the time, they had about a 10% rate of population to ours
Yeah.
and a 10% rate in calls, and it all sort of
Yep.
followed that it was about a 48,000, 50,000 cost annually to us, and that was 3 or 4 years ago.
yeah.
4 years ago, so I'm sure that's a much higher cost now, but at any rate, 5%, 5,000 is about, you know what it is. 10% of that 4-year-old number or estimate. Sorry, Pete, but
No.
that's why we're asking,
No.
because these costs just kind of keep going up for all the pieces of it.
And things change continuously over time, because at one time we were making money by going to Union for ambulance calls. Not anymore.
We make
I would
we
just
make
re-
revenue from the calls, I understand that, but we don't, but that's not a profit, that's only a portion of the overall cost
Right,
of the
but at
call.
one time, when the program started,
Yeah,
the revenue from those calls actually produced a profit. Now the
Those
revenue
days are
from those
gone.
calls, that's right, well, that's what I'm
Long
saying,
time.
is that things
Yeah.
change over time.
sure, sure.
You were gonna say, Stuart?
Let's say it's 10% of our calls. That is 10% of our revenue. So in very round figures, the last year, I think it was $320,000 of total income. Roughly 32,000 came from the town of Union. Let's pretend for a moment we didn't go to Union at all. We would lose the $32,000 of income. And your expenses would drop almost nothing. Because most of your expenses are all overhead.
That's all money that goes into Fund 17 that we use for replacing trucks and
The 32,000.
the 32,000, right?
So you lose the 32,000 and your expenses would not go down 32,000.
I know what you're saying.
But
What
your
we're looking
ambulance
at is
lasts
the
longer.
increase. What's that?
But your ambulance would last longer.
Maybe.
Maybe like 10%.
Stu, can I ask, so the other question I had was, in 2023, the dispatch fees were $20,000. And they're now 33. So it only went up a little bit since last year, but it's a big jump. Just in a couple of years.
The driving force behind that is, roughly speaking, 60% of the revenue for TN, the dispatch center, comes from the state of Connecticut. The state of Connecticut has changed their funding formula. Where it used to be very lucrative if we picked up another town, the town would say pay $20,000 in fees or dues, but the state would kick in $100,000. They don't do that anymore. There is a slight cost of living increase that they put into it, like 2 or 3%. But the revenue from the state is not going up, and the expenses to the center are going up. So hence the balance of the budget is spread across all the towns currently based on the number of calls that you have.
Are calls up substantially from 2023?
They've gone up, they've gone down by 100 or so calls here and there. I think 20 calendar year 23, they were higher. 24, I think they've gone down a little bit. The fire, the High Chase facility, which closed that for quite a while, and still remains very low in terms of call count. It impacted the number of calls we went on. We used to, the highest year ever, High Chase was like 115 calls. And this year it's looking like it's gonna be, it's like 10 calls a month, we go there. So it's cut that in half. Out of our control, but we can only go when they calls, pick up stuff, so.
What's the call total for the, for the most recent year ending? Like say
Don't
full
quote me,
fiscal
but
year.
about 1,000 or a little bit less.
So that is a little bit down, because wasn't it 1,200? The last-
Yeah, right, I think 2 years ago it was higher. Between High Chase and just lots of people call, we have no control over that,
Can you tell me, because you work at Tallinn Dispatch, right?
Yeah, that's my part.
Can you tell me, because I don't know, the ins and outs of the business, but what gets me is an increase like that. When you have like, contractual stuff like, like utilities or cars that you operate or gasoline and stuff like that. But if you're running a dispatch operation, it would seem to me that your costs are primarily your software and your personnel. Is there, like, what else am I not seeing that's in that increase in costs that they needed
The personnel.
What's it going
Don't
to?
quote me on the numbers, but personnel costs, I believe, about 70% of the budget up there. And they, you know, they're in a union, they negotiate a contract and it comes up to whatever it is. There's radio infrastructure as well that both is expensive to replace and repair. And there's, I think 34 tower sites that they maintain equipment on. As well as the dispatching software, and then there's a whole long list of copier expenses and in-house computer expenses and software, hardware agreements with other vendors, so on and so on.
So on average, if it's $32,000 a year, and it's 1,000 calls, then each call is $32.
That's approximately correct, yes.
Yeah, and that's like across the board, no matter what town you live in. when you call
Apply to
911.
everyone.
Okay.
It was a 3-year phase in, so this is the bill that you're looking at for the upcoming year is the latest and final of that phase in. From here on out will be that type of rate.
Does that compare with other dispatch setups? Are they're all charging like in New York, $32 a call or?
So some are much more, like 3 times OTM charges, and some are a little bit less. They all have different funding formulas where they're based on population, based on calls, based on the tax, either revenue or assessment of the town. In terms of grand list and their ability to pay. And there's about 7 major regional dispatch centers and they all do it slightly differently. And this one that I won't name, the other side of the state that charges about 3 times as much.
Thanks, Stu.
More questions regarding that? We'll move on to present to speak. We're just do a little recap. So this is kind of a halfway point. So you probate for granted that's a 90-second conversation. There's parts of recreation. I'm gonna assume we're gonna get a carbon copy of last year's budget.
Yeah, that'd be a good guess. Oh, we did hire a new Parks and Rec director. She's starting the 20th, what's today? No, not today. Next Friday, something like that. I'm sorry. I lost it today. But she came and signed the paperwork.
Do you have a name?
I did up until you asked me.
Well, I didn't mean to, should I like telegraph that punch, you know?
Yeah.
Okay, go back and deep into the channels, go back.
Yeah,
into the back.
I'll try to remember. I'm
Okay.
sorry.
Just yell it out if you don't.
We're upstairs next week, right? Yes, we are. Yeah, next week's meeting is upstairs because the fire department group, they're gonna be meeting down here. So we're going upstairs.
I will try to make sure that the cameras work.
We have screens and things.
Yes.
Yep.
Big ones.
Good.
ARPA bought a big screen up there.
Big screens are good.
You've been there before. I was gonna say.
No, but I was wondering because I know we'll be heading into the point where we need the spreadsheet on the screen, which that's not easy to do.
Next week is Board of Ed, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that would be good to have a big screen.
What's the one after that, the 6th of March?
Selectmen, isn't it?
I'm gonna miss that one. I'm gonna be in
Oh, you're missing a big
the
one.
conference with that.
Well, the press people.
I might miss next week, I'm not sure yet. I said it's free hotel in New York City, Marco.
All right, if there's nothing else, we'll move on to present to speak. Public participation is desired and encouraged. Speakers will be limited to time and appropriateness of comments.
Maintain progress, stay on topic, and maintaining the decorum. Do we have anybody to speak? Do we have Nutella?
Hey, Nick, Myrtle Road, Wellington. Hey, real quick, was the auditor earlier saying that we had a surplus of 800,000 from 23-24 fiscal year?
General?
Sort of. But the fund balance was, it was almost 900,000, wasn't it? Then he was
Okay, so-
talking,
Okay, so we had about a surplus of 900,000.
Not necessarily a surplus.
yeah, it's not,
That's what I'm trying to figure out what he was trying to say. Because we had additional revenues that exceeded what was expected. And then we
That
had
was-
spent
and
less money too.
That was the investment income that Donna was telling us about. Had done better than we had anticipated, if I remember correctly.
Yes, that is correct.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nick. Mike, McCoo? Mike?
Hi, Mike McCoo, Clover Springs Drive. Just a quick comment. Having been on the Board of Finance during many presentations previously from Mahoney Sable, before I make my next comment, I don't question their validity at all. I think they're a very good firm, and I think their work is very good, but it would be easy for any of us, whether we have advanced knowledge or someone first time watching a Board of Finance meeting, to think that that report from the auditor says everything is wonderful. And I have no doubt that everything they looked at is appropriate. I don't accuse them of anything wrong at all. However, we should also keep in mind that we have recently seen accusations, which may even turn out to be unfounded, but we have seen accusations of some town assets being mismanaged. So we have to remember that that audit is limited in scope, and a true full audit and a actual assurance of everything is wonderful is not what that audit is telling us. It's telling us certain things were tested and they passed the test. So I just want to point that out, because as we look into our future, we should remember that we probably can't afford to have a net fine enough to catch all these things, but we should always be looking to how we make our fiscal procedures and our process and our oversight as effective as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Anybody else for present to speak? Anybody for good and welfare? All right, could we have a motion to adjourn the meeting for this evening? So moved. Second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
For the record, Jeff made the motion and Jason seconded. Okay, thanks, everybody. There we go.